Okay, welcome to Behind the Build. Today I have with me a gentleman from Europe, not from North America, not from Toronto, not from Canada. I have with me today Magnus Ström, but for the last 30 years he's been known as Strom.
That's right.
Originally from Sweden, now having spent the last 30 years in the UK, Magnus has built a substantial practice that has a global reach in multiple continents, and I am very honored to have him with me. So Magnus, thank you for taking time out of your busy day to talk about
That's all right.
yourself and your practice.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I'd been following Magnus's work for a little while. I'd finished a bunch of recordings and I needed to get back to it. And I said, let me reach out to him and see if he's willing to accommodate some time in his schedule for this. To which he obliged. So Magnus, you've heard the podcast before, so I would start it off by asking you a little bit about the early years of your life and what your interests looked like early in life. Whether it was math or sciences or it was the arts that you took an interest in, what was it for you that kind of sparked your interest that led down the path towards architecture? We're going to continue with Magnus in a moment, but I have a question. Have you ever walked up to a front door and it quietly sets the tone for everything else that you experience once you walk through it? Magnus talked about that feeling when you walk into a space and your blood pressure drops. Architecture has the power to do that, and sometimes so does a door. The front door to our house is one of my favorite things. It's not flashy, it doesn't try to be clever, but it's built right. It moves with almost no effort. So even 2-year-olds on my street that are coming by can open it. My 6-year-old, my 9-year-old, no issue. And the large handle is inviting. The fiberglass frame gives it strength and insulation. And the side glass offers just enough visibility to see who's there without giving anything away about the inside from the sidewalk. It opens and closes 40 to 50 times a day. Kids running in and out, grabbing water, snacks, toys, changing shoes, inviting friends over. It's probably the most used thing in our home. And after all that, it still looks brand new. That door and every window in our house came from the doors. A European window and door supplier that we work with a lot on projects with Drew Mandel, SMPL Design Studio, Eisen Architecture, and they do custom entry systems, tilt and turn windows. You can feel the quality in every detail. If you want to know more, check them out online or send me a note. It's Jonathan, Jonathan, at waldenhomes.ca, and I'll connect you directly. Now let's get back to Magnus.
I think I'm going to have to blame my parents for that one. I think, Sweden had a way of adopting modernism or functionalism, as it was called in Sweden, much more than in many other parts of the world. And you had modern buildings around you in life, like, you went to the public swimming pool, and I still remember it today. It was just like designed, built in the 50s, and it was a beautiful building. And I remember those things. And my mum's cousin lived in a 1940s white modernist, one of those proper little sugar cube white modernist buildings. So I remember I was always fascinated by it. And my parents were both kind of always said that they should have been architects, but none of them pursued that career. So I wanted to be an architect since I was 5 years old.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Had they explained to you what an architect did when you were that young?
Well, I think that it came about because my parents, they renovated houses, and then they built a summer house when I was very little. And I remember my dad sitting, doing some drawing himself and doing lots of building. So I was helping out. I remember building a model of the house. So I started drawing. I remember drawing like plans and elevations of houses when I was a kid. And I remember once I was doing it and I was very proud, and I went to show my dad, and he just looked at me and he said, "You do realize that the staircase have to be in the same place on the first floor and on the ground floor." So, I walked away with my tail behind between my legs. But I think that, there's also something, about honest criticism and honesty in conversations that I like. But I remember that very clearly to this day.
And had you drawn this image with pen or with pencil? Do you remember?
There was pencil and ruler, and there was proper wall thicknesses and stuff like that. Yeah.
Oh, with wall thicknesses.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think I was 5. I must have been probably 8, 9 or something like that at that time. But I remember it clearly. Yeah.
And so did you take that piece of paper and did you erase, or did you go back and like reevaluate how you were going to design it?
I know I can't recall that. I can just recall the kind of the comment, the critique, so to speak, as we call it in architecture, and you learn from that, right?
And were the places that your parents renovating, what type of construction was it? Was it concrete? Was it stick frame? Was it steel? Like, what was it?
It was, I mean, one of them was 1940s, and there was a mix of kind of block brick and stud work that was filled with newspaper or whatever they used back then, and then the summer house they built when I was a kid was all stick frame.
Okay.
And I remember helping out, and then my parents built another house when I was just starting uni, and I go back in the summers and I'd labor for my dad in the house
as a framer. Or were you?
No. That back then that was a lightweight concrete house. And I just remember doing a lot of some finishing carpentry on the first floor and doing. We actually rendered all the walls inside, so we didn't have any dry lining or anything like that. It was no sheetrock walls. It was more like we just actually literally rough plaster on the walls. It was kind of a rough finish.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so at that point in university, had you established the path? Were you already studying architecture, or were you studying something else?
No, that was a slightly more roundabout way about it, because in Sweden there was 3 schools of architecture.
Okay.
And it's one of the hardest things that you could possibly get into. So you needed to have top marks across every different subjects. And I didn't have good enough marks. I was spending far too much time sailing. I actually went to a sports high school. So in Sweden, we got high schools in every kind of sport. So young kids can do a sport at a high level and have training without messing up their academics.
Right.
But my grades weren't good enough. So, I couldn't get into School of Architecture. And there is tests. So you can see if you've got aptitude. And I made the first cut, but not the second cut. So I then decided I studied business because I thought it was a general degree. And then I did that for 3 months and I hated it. And I buggered off skiing for a season, and then I came back home, and then I thought, I'll do building engineering because that I can come in the back way. And then I went to the first lecture because that was quite easy to get into in uni. And I remember the first lecture I went to it, and it was like just maths, and I absolutely hated it. And I said, I hated maths in school, so I'm certainly not going to do this. I just walked straight out again. That was my shortest degree. It was 3 hours.
I have this fond memory of grade 10. When grade 11. Grade 10 math was mandatory, and grade 11 math, I was like 3 weeks into the math, and I was like, I got this exam. I bombed it, and I told my teacher, I'm like, I'm dropping your class. He's like, you're dropping math? I said, yes, done. Yeah. And he handed me a sheet of all the jobs that you would no longer be able to get. And I said, do you think in any of those jobs, by the time that I'm old enough in my career, that there won't be some level of like assistance for math? Or that I can't turn to someone that has the skills? I'll be okay.
Yeah. No, I hated this. I remember I'm not doing that. And so that was 2 failed degrees, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that you've got to learn to fail gracefully. And then I, just messed about a bit. And then it comes a point where 2 years after I finished school, I really need to do something. And I wanted to be an architect. It's what I wanted to do. And then in 95, Sweden became members of the European Union. And that meant that I could apply for any university in Europe and study for free. So I thought, what languages do I speak? I could do the Scandinavian countries or Germany or England. And I thought I don't fancy Germany. So I thought, we'll try England. So I applied to 4 universities in England and I got accepted at 3. Yeah, and then it was just like pot luck where I went.
Soon you'll hear Magnus talk about something that really resonated with me. His belief in clarity and minimalism in architecture, that restraint, knowing what to include and what to leave out, has a way of shaping how we live, not just how things look. It's the same principle that guided the kitchen in our home. We chose panel-ready appliances, not just for the clean aesthetic, but because we didn't want the kitchen to announce itself. Everything blends in. It feels quiet, refined, and lasting. Those choices were guided by the team at Kaplan's Appliances. They didn't just sell appliances, they help you figure out what makes sense for your design, your budget, which is vital, and your clients. Whether you're looking at Sub-Zero, Wolf, Miele, Jenner, La Cornue, or Fisher and Paykel, they understand the differences. Panel ready or stainless, bold colors or minimalist. It's about knowing what fits the project and the budget. Their team was thoughtful and informed, which is rare and made all the difference. If you're in the middle of a spec or you want someone to walk through options with you, you can visit Kaplan's online or reach out to me directly, and I'll gladly make the introduction to one of their team members. Email me. It's Jonathan, Jonathan, at waldenhomes.ca. Now, back to Magnus. And are you still in contact with any of the other students that you went to school with?
Yeah, I got one of the guys who's my technical director. He was actually a year above me in uni, so he works for me now.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go through this. So you finish university. How long was the degree?
So in England, we do a 3 years bachelor's degree.
Okay.
And then we work in practice for a year normally.
Okay.
It's called a part 1 placement. And then you go back and do your master's for 2 years. And
Okay.
then you do another year in practice before you can set your professional exam. So when I did my year out, I did a short stint in London. But I remember my first job there. It was, £12,500 a year. And by the time you paid your rent in London, and then, I remember eating like the cheapest sliced bread with value jam on it, like a packed lunch, because that's all I could afford. And then I got like, after 3 months, I got like, well, this is actually quite rubbish. So I actually got a job down south of England instead. And and I had a really good year out there. And then actually I stayed on working at that practice throughout my master's, which was very good. So I worked through my whole master's.
Is this a place that do you want to talk about where it was, or do you want to leave it?
They called Architecture PLB. And it's funny because he was one of those firms in Winchester that loads of, there were some tutors that were teaching at university that worked there. And there's a lot of other people that, around my age that have worked there and now have their own practices, or they've gone through it. So it was one of those places. They did a lot of residential and educational.
Okay. And was it also, when you say residential, was it single family or was it multi?
No, it was multifamily and schools. Yeah.
Okay. And was it dedicated to a certain region, or were they open to working in different areas? Like where I'm going with this is, and we'll get there, but with your practice now having worked in multiple areas across the world, I'm curious, did you get some flavor for that previously?
No, not in that. That was they worked mostly in South England.
Okay.
But when I then went back and did my master's, and then when we do our final crit, so to speak, we have external examiners.
Yeah.
And I had an external examiner called John Meagher from Dublin, Ireland. Okay. So he was my external examiner, and he offered me a job. So I went to work for them in Dublin after I graduated from my master's. The firm was called the Blacam and Meagher.
And what was it like working there?
I mean, that was a really cool experience, actually, because the Blacam and Meagher is a firm that is very well regarded in Ireland. And Shane de Blacam had worked for Louis Kahn, and John Meagher worked for Scott Venturi Brown. And they both came back to Dublin at around the same time and set up a kind of a partnership together. Although it was almost like two separate offices under one umbrella, because Shane was doing more civic work. It was like very Carnian and heavy brick, whereas John was he's doing a lot of one-off houses, quite inspired by Alto. And he was very well connected in Ireland. So he worked with lots of celebrities and so on across Dublin. And also they did houses overseas as well.
Okay, so this is
Yeah.
where you got like a really strong foundation of.
Yes, I mean, I suppose I was always interested in the one-off house as projects, and I enjoyed that massively. And in university as well, when we had to do urban studies and the kind of master planning, it was not my thing. I wasn't interested in that at all. I liked the more humane scale and the touchy-feely scale of it.
It's interesting because it's such a different experience working with a
Yeah,
homeowner versus a board of directors or an ownership group or.
absolutely. Yeah.
So how long did you stay at that practice?
I was only there for about a year, actually.
Okay.
I worked on a very interesting house for an Irish film director, and it was a really good experience. And then I got a call one day from one of my old tutors at university who said, I'm opening up a practice because he had a practice in the late 80s, but then recession hit and he went more into teaching. And then he was getting some work again, so I joined him. So I was there for 8 years and doing mostly one-off resi, but also some multi-resi.
Okay.
Mm.
And where was this location?
And it's down here in New Forest where I am right now.
Okay.
Yeah,
And so there was some travel involved in the startup of this career back.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And so you were there for 8 years, and like, what was it about where you were professionally that had you kind of thinking or itching that I should go out and start my own practice?
I think I was always interested in having my own practice somehow. But
Okay.
then when I was working in that job, I kind of, at some point, I thought like, oh, I don't need to do that because I was a director of that practice and I thought I had a very good kind of trajectory and how that was working. I was a director at 36, something like that. And I was quite young and I had a lot of responsibility. And that was very rewarding. But I think that, and then 2008, 2009 recession, and they always say like people set up practices in the recession, right? It was something that around that time that where interests, diverged, and that's when I thought, now I need to do this for myself. So I set up in 2010, which is now 15 years ago.
Okay. And at this point, just out of curiosity, were you on your own? Were you married at this point, or were you?
I had just met someone,
Okay.
yeah,
I asked
who
that
then
because
who became my wife. Yeah,
it's a between that and then starting your own practice, like leaving what you know and the steady paycheck,
yep,
and working towards establishing yourself and the unknown can be a daunting task when you've formulated some form of relationship. It's hard. It can be hard.
yeah. Of course it is. Yeah, it's very hard to set up.
Yeah.
It's
So
very hard.
so when you went out on your own, did you have a project to start off with, or how did that? What did that look?
Well, that's like we all did. We all moonlighted a bit and maybe did a couple of smaller things on the side. Did an extension for someone there, a friend there. You did the extension, and then so I remember I had £6,000 saved in the bank. That's not a lot of money, but it's a little bit more in back then maybe. But
Yeah.
£6,000 in the bank, and I had worked very closely on a project at my previous practice, and the client he said like, well, I want to continue working with you, Magnus. So I made a deal with my ex-boss that the product would be subcontracted to me. So it would still be like we had a joint credit in it, but it was subcontracted to me. So I did the working drawings package and then delivered it on site through Ström Architects. And that was my first products.
Wow.
Yeah.
That also says a lot about the relationship that you had with that owner.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
A lot of respect for each other and what you had been able to
Yeah.
establish.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
pretty special. So, and the moonlighting is, I would say, probably the most common thing I have heard from everyone.
Yeah.
Otherwise you're foolish to go out on your own
Yeah.
with the thing.
Yeah. But it's normally, as I always say, like there's three ways to set up a practice. One is you're a rock star, right?
Okay.
Like Bjarke Ingels. He had a summer off and he won 3 competitions, I think it was, and then he was launched.
Yeah.
Well, two is that you work at a big practice, like Foster's or something, and you're a director and you leave and you take lots of clients with you and you set up like Make Architects. or 3 is that you start doing French garage extensions and so on. Or there is some kind of mix between the 3, but that's normally the 3 options, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I always thought about it.
No, that sounds pretty accurate. I've heard far more out of the moonlighting and and the small little additions here and there, or the basement renovation or a kitchen renovation.
Yeah.
Than
But
I have.
it's the hard thing with that is that how do you build a reputation based on doing little extensions and so on? It's not the work you want to do, so you don't want to be recognized for it too much. So what work do you put up on your website? And it's the whole thing about having a portfolio. You're going to attract the kind of work you have in your portfolio. So you're going to make sure that you just don't have, small garage extensions or small back of house extensions in your portfolio, because you're going to attract that work. Then so you're going to make sure that you're very carefully what you put up and what you don't put up.
Right. Yeah, I actually, so I had interviewed someone about a year ago now. Her name was Vanessa, and she runs a successful practice here in Toronto. And I remember when I helped get her her first project as a new build.
Yeah.
And she was like, it was the first time we were able to do like a full, beautiful schedule of windows.
Yeah.
And what that feeling was like and what it did for the portfolio.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I think to your point, but it's also hard to turn down work when you're trying to go out on your own. Do you actually present the work that you're getting paid for, or do you keep that kind of to yourself until the bank account is somewhat stable, and then hopefully you can start to get something a little bit more interesting?
Well, so you do both. I was very fortunate that I could have a couple of projects that I had worked on that I could have on my website
Right.
before. And then some of the smaller stuff I did in the beginning, I've never showed that. It's never made its way out. And, I know someone that set up similar time to me, and they took on all the work and they put it out everywhere, and they grew a lot quicker and had a much bigger business very quickly. And I said, I don't want to do that because I don't want to get known for doing that. So I played it a lot slower. So it was much slower in the beginning for me, I think. And then, I managed to get a couple of one-off houses. It was quite interesting. One of the first ones I got, I was interviewed, one of 5 or 6 architects, and including my old boss was interviewed as well for it. And they, the client, when I got the job, I said, like, why did you give the job to me? And they said that you were the only one of 5 architects that asked us what we wanted. And I thought that was pretty striking. Everyone else went to them and said, like, this is what we'll do, this is what we'll do for you. But I asked them what they wanted. So that was a big kind of learning as well, very early in the beginning, that you need, it's all about the client. You've got to understand what it is they want and what they're asking for. I think that's slightly changed now than when you've been in the game a bit longer, because people know what you do. So you don't have to fight for it so much anymore, because there is a portfolio there that they kind of buy into, I suppose.
Right. And so when you established your practice, and we've talked a little bit about like what some of these projects were and these one-off homes, had you established the type of product that you wanted to design? Did you know that you wanted to do, minimalist, contemporary, and modern work, or were you kind of open to whatever would come your way as long as it kind of fit a certain criteria of scale of project?
No, I was always very focused on doing, modern contemporary architecture, definitely. But I remember when I kind of got one of my first projects, and you start thinking like you've been working for someone else for many years, and you sit down with a blank sheet of paper and you go, what am I about, right? So I went straight back to my university studies and what I did my dissertation and thesis on, and I looked very much back at how you can build architecture in a way. I looked at trying to analyze buildings through structure, details, material, and order. That is actually, tectonics of architecture, Kenneth Frampton. And so I started that way. And I think that's something, the clarity of that is something that still is in the work, that how you're pragmatic about how you build and how you design. But I think that as you get more experience and you get more knowledge, the way design develops. And sometimes, there's a lot of architecture that I think is process driven, and you can see it in some architects how they drive a process when they design, and the architecture ends up looking a certain way because of the process. I think that when you are experienced and you've done something for a fair bit of time, and you might have done, I don't know, maybe done 50 houses in your life, something like that, including previous work. I call it, for example, we're doing a house in Finland at the moment. So you've spoken with the client a lot. You spend out, you want to go out there and you sit and have lunch with the client and have a glass of wine, and you talk about what it is they want to get out of it. And we went out on the water and drove around the boat to see it from different angles. And you really kind of, subconsciously, everything goes into your head. You absorb all of this information, and then your brain synthesizes it all. So I was standing on site with my iPad, and I was just going I just literally sketched out what I wanted. That's because I call it the divine download. It's because you don't think about it. You just instinctively know, having, thought about the brief and how to chat with the client, all of that is just automatically synthesized.
Right.
Yes, you could arrive at exactly the same place by going through the process of, doing your analysis diagrams and this and that, but you absorb it, and you post-rationalize it in the same way. And I think so sometimes that comes really easily because you just know with your experience. But sometimes you have to go through all the steps to kind of get to the same result. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's easy. But sometimes it's really easy. And I think that you because you know what you're doing.
Yeah. And how did the client know that you were going to be pulling out your iPad to start sketching?
No.
Yeah. And were they present? Were they watching as you started to sketch?
Yeah.
Do you feel the pressure while they're there?
No. If you don't have the ideas, you don't get the iPad out, right? You don't get the sketchbook out. Yeah.
Fair. I don't know. Sometimes with someone over your shoulder as things are starting to unfold, and you're going to be susceptible to criticism in that exact moment.
And but I find that clients love to see the process of pen on paper and seeing how you draw, how you think. They love that. They absolutely love it.
Yes.
And the other thing that I said, an architect, you've got to learn to draw upside down. So that when you sit opposite them at the table and you start drawing upside down, they go, "Oh my God, you're drawing upside down." I love doing that because it's a really funny.
So okay, so you get to let's in some ways conclude what that was like. So you pull it out, you're drawing for them, and do they have the wow factor, or and is it? I guess in more so not like did you hit it on the first try because you very rarely can, but were they standing there saying you know what, this kind of feels like the right thing that we're doing right now? Okay.
It's hardly changed at all. We just started on site, and it hasn't really changed. It's gone through numerous iterations, but it's the concept is the same.
Okay.
It's we did in a funny way it's a holiday home, but also kind of a legacy project for them and their family. And it started off with that they come there in the summer, and then sometimes they come with an extended family. They know there's going to be grandkids in the future, but a lot of the time it's just two of them, and it's going to be used in different ways. So we almost did a deconstructed building when we took the whole brief for a house and deconstructed it in 3 different buildings. Actually 5 if you include a little garaging and a sauna on a little island. So we deconstructed the house. So the main house is almost like a little Farnsworth house. It's like a 1-bed pavilion.
Right.
And then we had one little building with 4 bedrooms in it and one with 2 studies in it. So sometimes they can all be full with people if everyone's there, but you can also just go and open up one building. Or when you come in with kids, but when you come up with kids and grandkids, they can be in the other building. So you have a little bit of separation and so on, which I think really helps as well.
Yeah. I like the concept of that. So, okay, so let's kind of go back to what it was like. So you open the practice, it's just you, right? Yeah. And how many projects were you working on at the early stage of practice? So within the first 2 years, how many projects would you have had?
Maybe 3 or 4 projects, something like that.
So at what point did you realize I need someone to help with this?
It was when, it's quite funny. Before then, it was kind of funny. In 2010, when I set up, suddenly that's when all the really good photographic quality CGI kicked off.
Okay.
And you had magazines like, online magazines like Design and Arc Daily started to come about. And suddenly, I think magazines who, used to publish 8 magazines a year and they would have two projects or something like that per magazine. It was like very low demand to get something published, right? It was very hard to get in. And suddenly these people were putting out 10 stories a day. And so you could get stuff published if you had really good viz for your project.
Yeah.
And I remember when I got one of my first houses, I happened to have seen a guy who did this fantastic render. So I just rang him up and I said, would you do some renders for me? So I spent like 25% of the fee for the project on Peter to do my renders. And that was a serious investment.
Tell you this was a crazy business decision?
No, it is best decision I've done, right? Okay. Because it got published and it got into Design and Arc Daily and so on. And and social media started to kick off, and suddenly you had all of this. You could get publicity, and that started to then spiraled. But the project that really kind of changed is a project called The Quest, and that came to us in maybe was it 2013? I think it was something like that. And it was an elderly couple in their 70s. They wanted a house for their retirement, and their friends had designed a house with my previous practice. So they had asked them for a recommendation and they said, like, oh, go to Magnus. He's just set up his business. So I went to see them when they were just buying the site. And that was a really fantastic project. And it was almost iconic in a little way because we did that building. It was a 2 concrete slab that acted like a space beam, a cantilevered out over a wall and had a car parking underneath. And it became very striking and visually easy to understand the project. And I think because it was so easy to understand the architecture very quickly, it just got a lot of traction. Mm-hmm. And it won numerous awards. I think it won 7 or 8 architecture awards. And it was published in lots of magazines online, and it's been in books. And, that still kind of today sometimes gives us client inquiries. One of the clients projects we're doing in the States at the moment in Western Virginia, he said, I love that project. And he saw it in a book. He started that project in 22, I think. So, it helps being in business for a bit longer because it all accumulates somehow. You've got a bigger network of stuff out there that people can discover.
Yes. Yeah, I see the project. So, a lot of glazing. This is like an somewhat early stage of using all the fluting too, the detail on the exterior, which has become so popular nowadays. So, are there certain materials that you really like to work with and play with in your architecture?
I think that there are certainly some things. I love timber in many ways, being Scandinavian. Mm-hmm. Whether we use it internally or externally. We very often use it for cladding, but very often we use it for ceilings, for example, ceilings that run inside, outside. Yeah. It gives a real warmth to the interior, but it can also help you acoustically very well. And sometimes we can hide servicing behind it and so on. So it works in many ways. We work a lot with stone. Local here in England, we do a lot of local stone. Mm-hmm. And brick every now and then as well. And then stone and lots of stone tiles, porcelain tiles, and then minimalist glazing.
And I noticed that a lot. As much as you can, a lot of if you can, floor to ceiling glass, beautiful curtain. Yeah. So back to the question that I had asked before. So who or what role did the first person you brought into the practice? What did they fulfill?
So she was an architectural assistant. So she had finished her degree and she had worked, but she was just going through a professional exam at the moment. So she came in as an assistant, but very quickly she became a project architect and ran her own projects.
Fantastic. How many years in did you start to realize I need a staff?
Yeah, that was probably like 3 or 4 years in when I got my first office is when you moved out of the spare bedroom at home.
Okay. And was it all were all the staff that you brought in people that were working on design, or did you bring in anyone to help with the operation?
Well, so my my ex-wife, now ex-wife, then wife, she helped me on and off sometimes with some of the office management stuff. And, and that was really helpful because, there's a lot of stuff you need to sort out all the time, like, all the background stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that when we were about, I don't know, 6, 7 people, something like that, I hired another office manager who, I said a really good hire. And she worked as an office manager maybe for 3 years, something like that.
Okay.
But as the business grew a little bit, we became a little bit busier. Maybe we became 10, 11 people, something like that. I was still doing quite a lot of the businessy side and didn't have enough time to work as an architect, really. So she got a promotion and I made her managing director of the business. So she now runs the business.
Okay.
And for me, that's like a godsend because I don't have to sit and deal with all the businessy stuff. And so it's, even we're a small practice, we run it in a kind of, we have a board meeting every month, but it's just the two of us, right? But we run it as a board meeting. So we run our like a CEO report and we run our same agenda every time and our financial reporting and so on. And we're doing a weekly reporting as well, just checking in where we are, what's going on. And so she deflects and saves, she keeps me sane. Yeah. I couldn't do what I would do otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, what I have seen is one of the most common traits of any business owner is that the most taxing element of the business is the business, and it's not what as much as you want to be a business owner, running a business is a challenge. This
Of course it is.
Joy.
Yeah. It is really tough, and I have a lot of ideas and all the time about how we should do things and what we should change and what we should make better. But I'm not the best person to implement it. That's for sure. Yeah.
And have you found that by obviously, I mean, you've alluded to it already, but the change in bringing her in to do that has now afforded you the opportunity to be far more involved with your design team.
Yeah, absolutely.
And has it freed up your overall time in some capacity to be able to allow you to do other things that you want to be involved with? So whether that's like the creative elements of what you just described of trying to push the entire business forward in a new direction, or coming up with ideas for things that you want to improve, or beyond that, taking on like a hobby that you haven't been able to take on because you've been trying to push a business forward for 20 years?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different answers to that. One is that I'm a single dad. I'm divorced and I have my kids 50-50. So every second week I'm a dad, right? So I gotta do the school run, and luckily I have someone helping me with pickup and stuff. But you gotta be home for dinner, and you're doing that, and that's a lot of work, like everyone knows, a parent, right? And then you're gonna run a business on top of that, and then you're gonna try and stay fit, and you're gonna try and have some form of interest, do some hobby. You're gonna try and see some friends, and you're gonna try and maybe have some form of relationship with someone as well. And you can have, it's like I call it like a gas cooker, right? And you got 5 or 6 burners on it, but you can't have them all burning at once.
Or at least not not on high.
Yeah. So that's really challenging. And I think so without having my MD, I wouldn't be able to kind of, I think it would be much harder, and I certainly would have to throttle back on the business. But I don't want to throttle back. I think that you got to keep pushing. You gotta keep pushing all the time. You gotta keep innovating. You gotta keep changing, and you gotta keep pushing, whether it's design or push where the business is going. And I think if you don't do that, you stagnate. And I think it's very easy to kind of fall away or stagnate. So, in particular, as I think that I think that you might want to bleep this out, but I think about the UK, I think the economy is fucked basically, and we're running at 100% debt, national debt to GDP. We have signed very few projects in the last 3 years. We have signed 2 projects in the UK. And and this comes back to the whole thing about innovating and pushing. If I hadn't been pushing and pushing and pushing, we wouldn't have been able to do more of the overseas work. So if we wouldn't have been able to pivot at that time, we would have been decimated.
Right.
But because you got to look forward all the time, and sometimes I go like, you say like, you're actually really tired and you need to take some time out, and that's why I am right there at the moment. But there is no other option, right? You got to keep pushing.
Yes.
Another friend of mine who runs a business, he said like, I mean, they're much bigger, but he said it's like servicing a jumbo jet while flying it. It never lands, right? And that's the truth to it. It's a constant thing, and you got to keep picking at it the whole time. So the whole time is about improving systems. Earlier today, I was sitting down before our call, and I was updating our procedures for what a project lead should be doing on a weekly basis.
Soon you'll hear Magnus talk about a legacy home in Finland, designed through listening, conversation, and a deep understanding of place. That mindset, working with the land instead of against it, is why I'm drawn to Aquanta Pools, with systems based out of Italy called Biodesign. They're not building traditional backyard pools. They're creating fully custom aquatic systems that blend into the site, often requiring minimal excavation and using patented construction methods to reduce environmental impact. These pools don't announce themselves. They feel like they've always been there, shaped by the slope, the views, and how people actually live in the space. Whether it's for a rural retreat, a modern cottage, or a long-term family home, Aquanta builds pools that prioritize clarity, craft, and landscape-first thinking. You can learn more at aquanta.ca or reach out to me directly for an introduction to Yuri, the owner, and really an amazing man. Email me. It's Jonathan, JONATHAN, at waldenhomes.ca. And now, Magnus. Yeah. Yeah, you and I had this conversation very lightly in our conversation.
Yeah. Because I just came out of a client meeting earlier today when the client was saying like, I'm not happy with what you've done here, and here. And I go like, okay, all right. And you got to respond, right? You got to respond. And the thing is that you do delegate. When you delegate, you got to have an understanding of you delegate and accountability. What are people accountable for, and how do I manage that, and how do I review that on a weekly basis? So all the time we are changing and improving our systems, and because of it becoming a better practice.
Yes.
And the other thing is like, I think that, but because you're constantly pushing, it's like I listened to something else the other day. It was Simon Bayliss of HTA Design. He said like, architecture is one of the best professions you can have if you're willing to work hard. And if you're not, there's a lot of other careers that would be probably much better and far more financially rewarding as well. But it's a fantastic job to have. And I think that I feel like I'm constantly pushing what we're doing from, how we deliver projects, both from that whole kind of delivery side, project management, but also what we deliver in terms of design, because everything is constantly moving, and you do something and then you see someone else doing something very similar and you're like, oh, can I push again and do something different?
Right.
And you keep pushing and pushing. And I think that at times it's very frustrating because I'm never happy. I'm never content. Because if you are content with like, this is my project now and this is the best thing I've done, then you kind of, you stagnate, right? You got to keep pushing forward so that you're always looking for the next thing. Or did I hear someone say, was it on your podcast, Brian. Lyons, and he was saying like, what's your favorite project? It's the next one.
Yeah.
And I think there is something to that, right? And you got to keep pushing and innovating. And then you're also trying to keep an office happy. And I think like, oh, here's Magnus, it's changing again, it's pushing again. And I think that sometimes it's exhausting for the office, and it can be very tiring for the office. But I think that they, and I'm not the best at celebrating the small wins all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I need to get better at that, and to appreciate the team sometimes. And it's like, because without the team, we're nothing.
Yes.
And they work so hard and they're doing so well all the time. And there am I poking at them all the time because I'm trying to make them even better. And it's not your role. And it's kind of, but I suppose it's my job to some extent, and it's because I'm trying to make what we do better all the time.
Yes.
All the time, I'm trying to push us because I know there's not many other practices in the UK that can deliver the products that we do to that quality. So you keep pushing.
Yes. It's funny, so as you're saying all of this and you're providing some of the analogies, I've played tennis my whole life. I coached for many years, and I took a long time away from it, and I've gotten back into it in the last few years. And what I have come to appreciate about it now differently than before, and when you look at professional players, the top echelon of player in tennis has a whiteboard of a mind. And that is that they can celebrate that winner and then completely erase it from their mind as they start the next point. And the next point, in many ways, is in some ways similar to what you're describing. Like, that's over. It's behind us. We've completed that project, and it's beautiful. Let's focus on the next shot.
Yeah.
And it's happening at that pace.
Yeah. And the thing is as well, when you're in a project,
yes,
all you see is every little problem. You forget to see the overall thing. And it's the same thing about building a business. When you live in it on day to day, all you feel is the critique,
yes.
the grind,
yeah.
the hardships, the everything that's being fired at you, and you kind of go trying to like bat it away. And that's what I was going to say. Yes, and sometimes you see all of those little negative things, and they're kind of niggling at you, and you forget to stop and actually look. So one of the favorite things I think about we have projects, it is that some clients you develop a bit of a relationship with, and sometimes you might go back and see them, or when you go back and doing a photo shoot, and might go back and do some I don't know, some filming or whatever it is, and you go back and you see the client. I recently did a video shoot, a photo shoot of one of our projects, and the client had just come in from work, and I said, like, we just talked about it, and he said, "Oh, I love living in the house now." I said, like when he was self-building whilst working as well. So he said, like, it almost broke me, and I hated it almost, like, and he said, like, but now we lived here for a bit, like after the first year, then now they absolutely love it, right? And you see how it's changed, and it's settled in, and they have, as a family, are settled in, and they really made the house theirs. When you coming back and you see the progress at that level, you're gonna go, wow, this is what we achieved.
Hmm.
And it's the same thing when you walk in through the office door. Sometimes, you can go and open the door, and you see and you see all the desks, right? And you go up, yep, we did this. So I think it's important to celebrate those little wins, and it's something I need to get better at.
Well, so here's an idea. I didn't know that we would go there. But if you have other meetings that are about the project improvement and all the rest of it, maybe there's an incorporated meeting as a company where it's literally it's 10 minutes in the week, and it's just sharing some of the successes of the week. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Everyone gets to share one success.
Yeah.
Whether it was a detail that was evading them and they came up with and they now have solved, or it was a client issue. 10 minutes in the week, and you do it toward the end of the week, and it allows someone to be able to feel like they're being heard.
Yeah.
We incorporated a couple of years ago. We incorporated a town hall every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And we talk about areas of improvement, and we talk about things that are going well, and we talk about why we do certain processes from the point of sale to what's being delivered as you go. And it just reinforces a lot of the requirements that we look for from the construction managers and from our back-end team that support the architecture we're building.
Yeah.
It matters, you want to align everyone. And it's hard. It's, to the point that you made, it's hard. It's hard to not be the person that is always trying to drive forward.
Yeah, and it's hard because you become the one that's negative as well, right? Because you're saying, like, this is not good enough. We can do this better.
Yeah.
And it's tough, right? But yeah.
Well, so then let's take a moment and talk about what you feel have been some of the more ambitious, but in your own opinion, some of the most rewarding, perhaps details or projects that you've had? Are there some specific details on a project that you really had to rack your brain around with some of the team that when they were executed, you said like it was worth the squeeze?
I think that there are lots of little things all the time, and there are, one thing people always ask us, how do you do that? How do you do that detail? Like, a thin edged roof, for example. How do you do that? We always get asked that. And you think that, yeah, but what about all the snow loads of water loading and water, how you take water away? And it's like, we just keep on working on it. I mean, we know that now, how we do that, how we tape the steel frames down and so on, and how we deal with, getting the water away and stuff. I mean, that's always tricky, but I think that one of my strengths is that I'm a far better curator than I am a designer, which means that it's one thing to sit down and come up with something amazing. But if something in front of me, I can say what's wrong with it and make it better. So, when I was working on my own, I used to pretend to be two different people. I would sit on one side of the table and force myself to design something and pretend that, like that was what my boss had given me. And then I would go sit on the other table around the other side. And so like, my boss just given me, say, I need to make this into something. And it was literally a way of forcing me into doing work rather than, because you expect yourself to come up with something amazing, but it's a process.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, like, I think my strength is that I'm very good to see, I can see through the trees. I can look at something and I can digest it and I can see it and I can see the solution. So with one of the architects in the office and they have an issue and I can go like, well, just do this. And I go like, how do you know how to do that? Well, it's like you can almost, you see all the information and you process it without thinking about it.
Yeah.
And that's one of my strengths, is that you can really go through that process very, very quickly.
And so,
what was the question again? Kind of.
oh, if there was a specific project or detail that you found to be challenging that you were able to achieve through some form of dialogue and experimentation, that when
I
you
mean, yeah, I
finally achieved
suppose.
it, you're like, there it is.
I don't think it's like eureka moments like that. I think it's just a process of going through things and trying to think. I had a meeting earlier today when we were working on a project in Romania, and we're working through some details, and they were saying like, oh, we have to have this upstand here because or downstand here because we have to strengthen the slab here. And it's like, well, we can't do that because we've got a window sitting flush with the floor there, so we don't have space for it. So we just like, oh no, you can't, you've got to have this. And I said, like, well, why don't you just hang it? Why don't you put the beam in above the roof space? We've got space there. And they go like, I suppose we can do that, right? It's like, it's how you think about things. Just because it was about thinking about designing. When we did the Quest, for example, what was unique with that house was that we worked very closely with the engineer at that time, and we designed it as a concrete frame, but we inverted it. So it's an exposed concrete frame, and the whole structure is cold, and then it's insulated on the inside. There's a waterproof concrete, and the house is a dry lined box on the inside of the concrete. And that's like, I can't remember seeing any houses done like that, but it was a very easy way of doing the concrete frame and making sure it worked well. Because otherwise we couldn't expose the concrete, because then we have to do thermal breaks in the concrete and all of this, and it would have been very complicated.
Right.
So we turned something that could be complicated into something that was very easy.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
So tell me, you've alluded to the importance of integrating things like renders when it started, and the opportunities of getting in front of some of the publications earlier when they started to come out. So as you move forward now, what do you see as some of the opportunities that you want to try to pursue, or that you might want to change in what you're doing to continue to stay ahead? Is there something that you see now, or are you just always keeping an open mind to what's in front of you?
Yeah, we are keeping an open mind to what's in front of us, but I think that at the moment, I feel that the climate and how it is in terms of the financial climate, and I don't think the UK is alone in this.
No, it's not. It's here too.
So if you're trying to grow a practice, you can't grow it like going up with the economy. It's just like everything's going up and you're growing. So instead you've got to take market share from other people and be better than other people.
Yeah.
And that makes it even harder, right?
Yes.
So, but I think that there's hard enough to work in, it's hard enough to trying to make it in one place. So if we can't just get enough work here, we've got to go overseas. And I think for us, the working overseas has been a godsend, and we now done projects in, I think, more than 10 countries.
Yeah.
And I see a continued expansion overseas for us.
Right.
We are going to open up our first office overseas this year.
Okay.
I can't say where yet because we're just going through all the, permissions and legal stuff. And until we've done that, I can't say where it is. So that's going to be really exciting. And I have a business partner there who's already in place. Who's got 10, 15 years experience there. So that's going to have access to a new market somewhere we've already done work.
Yep.
So I think that definitely.
Wait, hold on. I'm going to do what you say you never get to do, and that is I'll say congratulations in advance of it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, because that's a big move. That's also putting now a lot of trust in what the relationship is with someone overseas. So, congratulations on that. It's hard to hand over that type of equity. Yeah,
it is. It is. But I'm really looking forward to that because I think that it's going to be easier to create growth in other places.
Yeah.
Overseas as well, there can be, if we can access certain countries where there's a lot more money and people are spending a lot more money on houses. I mean, if you think about, for example, the US and Canadian clients that very often come and spend money in other places, and they spend a lot of money. There is, and the same thing in the Middle East. There's a lot of opportunity there, and we've done several projects there. And people are spending more money than they're perhaps doing in the UK on houses. And also, it's not so frowned upon, perhaps, to spend money on something, success. It's like, people celebrate success, and they're saying like, "Oh, great for you! You're building a great house." Whereas here, it's like, "Well, you're building a house for rich people." It's like, that's not really a cool thing to do. And that's reflected in the,
here as well, but like,
but it's like there's certainly certain awards now at the moment I wouldn't even bother submitting for them,
right? Because
it's just completely quixotic. It's just like so driven by political agenda, and if you're not on the right side of it, it's like I had architect judges come and see projects, and they've been turning up the noses at what car the client had because they offended them that they had a nice 911.
Right.
And it's like there's always going to be people that have more money than others. There's always going to be people who are successful, and they're always going to want to spend the money on something. And we can choose not to build houses for them, but at the end of the day, they're going to buy houses. So
and I'd rather help them design it.
I'd rather help them do it in a good way when they're creating some architecture that's going to last for a couple of 100 years, maybe if we're lucky, and also something that's sustainable and make a positive contribution rather than these noddy boxes and very ugly multi-housing that's been churned out.
Yeah. Have you integrated AI at all into what you're doing?
We are looking at, obviously we're using the usual ChatGPT in writing stuff and so on. And we have looked at it, and I actually had assigned some young people to it in the office early this year to look at it, and they tested a few things, but we played around with some kind of renders and so on. But what I see is that it's nothing that quite impresses me at the moment, because it's one thing to create an image, but what does an image actually mean? You can get Midjourney to spit out some cool images, but is it what does it do for the architecture? It might be good for ideation or something like that, but sticking on Instagram, but hopefully we can build something that's got a bit more meaning to it.
Right.
There is Simon Sinek said something about you can get a ChatGPT to spit out a book for you on leadership or whatever, but he said like, what does that actually mean? But he said like, if he writes a book about something like that, it means something because he's been talking about it and living it for 25 years.
Right.
And that someone takes the time to sit down and write it down, and that it's actually a life lived with experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the same thing about architecture. We're turning 15 years this year as a practice. And instead of shouting about ourselves too much, we are doing a series of little films where we are interviewing and talking to other people in other creative industries. So we've just done a film with a tailor from Savile Row. And, what's the link between tailoring and architecture? And maybe not direct, but sitting down with the chap, James from Cad and the Dandy, and we were talking about the process of that you're actually creating something. How do you create a suit, and what is it? What's that process? And it's a whole process of knowing something, of having done it before and experience. Of course, you can go and buy a nice Hugo Boss suit off the shelf, but this is a bespoke experience. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very much where we're sitting with our architecture. Yes, you can go and churn something out, perhaps through AI, and I'm sure a lot of stuff going to be replaced. But we're trying to do something that has perhaps a little bit deeper meaning, something that is based on humanity and experience and the life lived.
Yeah, well, the AI,
because I think that yes, sure, we can replace a lot of stuff, but we're trying to do something that's got a bit of a human touch to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say that AI can't go on the boat. It can't walk. It can't walk the site. It doesn't understand the smell. It doesn't understand. It can't. It can't replace that. At least not yet. And I don't know that it will necessarily in the near future. So outside of all of this, you alluded to it a little bit before about some of the different burners. So what do you like to do that's outside of practice? What do you do for yourself that allows you to take your mind off of the things that are perpetually driving you forward with business? Hobbies.
You know what? The weird thing is, like, I love sailing. I sailed my whole life.
Okay.
And we normally go out racing on a Thursday night here. I live in a town that's got 3 marinas, and there's a lot of Thursday night sailing going on. And the fun thing about just doing club racing on a Thursday night here is that you will be out and there will be world champions and Olympic champions sailors down here, because they all come from here as well. Not all, but several of them come from here and live here. So you go out and have a Thursday night sailing with them, and and then a few beers after. And Thursday, I think that is a lovely setup. But because of the pressures on life, I haven't been able to go. There's been 1 week this year I've been able to go. And that's just like at the moment that there is a lot of pressures. And because I'm on every second week, I said, the kids. So every other week then is when you're doing all the meetings and the travel and so on. I haven't been away for a little while now, but sometimes there's a lot of traveling and being overseas, and you're trying to fit it all in. I'm just teaching myself to play golf at the moment.
Okay.
So you got to do something. And I was thinking of buying myself a little dinghy and getting out, but I know I wouldn't be out on it enough, and it would just be feeling guilty for the money sitting in the harbor and not doing anything. And I go like, oh, it's rainy today. I don't fancy going out and being wet and cold. So it's easier to go and hit some golf balls.
Okay.
So I'm trying to do that at the moment.
Is that at a range or on a course?
It's a little bit of both. We got a little 9-hole golf course, it's right literally between my office and my house. So It's very easy to go. This week I've actually been to hit a couple of buckets twice this week after work, because I don't have any kids this week.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about like do you do any early morning walks? Or
I do actually. I got into a very good morning routine, and for me, it's one of my ways of keeping me sane. And I know that when I'm burning the candle at both ends, I know it instantly, because that's when my headaches and migraines start. So what I normally do is, like, my alarm goes 6 every morning, and I normally go up and I'll do a quick 15-minute meditation. And then I go out for a walk. I live right next to a forest, and I go for a 40-minute walk. I'll normally plug a podcast in or something like that. And then I come in and I try and eat a really healthy breakfast. And then I'm in, sometimes I do a little bit of journaling or writing. And then I'm a little bit of thinking, just having a little bit of headspace. Not as easy to do on the weeks I have kids, but I'm trying to do that. And when I had that headspace before I come into the office, it completely changes my outlook for the whole day, and how you can approach things. And because you just take a little bit of time to digest and think things through, it makes an extraordinary experience, an enormous difference for me.
Mm-hmm. Magnus, it has been a pleasure chatting with you and getting to understand really all, and as quick a way as possible to learning about your life and learning about the experiences you've had and what you've accomplished for your practice. I thank you for taking the time. I thank you. Yeah, I do.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise.
Yeah.
I'm going to stay in touch, and I hope to hear as we continue to stay in contact, hopefully about how you can start celebrating some of the small wins, because from what you've said, that seems like that's the one of those areas that will change things.
I think so. And the other thing that I'm really trying to focus on is that we celebrating the wins, but also it's all the little bits between all the big events. That's all the important stuff, right? It's all those everyday things about sharing moments with someone else or sharing life with someone. And I think that's something I'm trying to put more and more focus on, and I'm trying to do it consciously. Because we're not going to be around forever, right?
No, we're not. We have an expiry date.
Yeah.
But if what we've done while we're here plays a part in longevity, I think architecture is one of those areas where you can, you hopefully get to live on in some capacity for a longer period of time.
The other thing I was going to say this, because I was thought about this the other day. There is an American chap called Arthur Brooks, who's like a writer and policymaker. And I saw a clip on something, I can't remember where it was. And this analogy I thought was so relevant. He was saying that he used to travel a lot to Taiwan, and everyone said, like, oh, if you've got some time over, you've got to go and see the Palace Museum. It's got the biggest collection of Chinese art in the world, and it's extraordinary. But he said it's simply so big that you can't see it. So the way to do it is to hire a guide and say, go and show me the 10 most important pieces and tell me why they're important. So he was walking around and learning lots of stuff. And then they stopped in front of this kind of massive jade sculpture. And he asked, how do I intrinsically know that this is Chinese art? And he goes, that's not an art question. That's a philosophical question. And he says, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. How do you mean? He said, well, when you in the Western culture think of a piece of art that is yet to be started, what do you think of? And he goes, a blank canvas. And he goes, exactly. Whereas we in the Western world, we think of this piece, this jade boulder. The piece of art is in there. It's always been in there. We just need to chip away all the things that is superfluous and not necessary to reveal the true essence. And he said, and the same thing goes for life. In the Western world, your definition of success is that you collect more and more things, right? You add things to that canvas, more brushstrokes, more paint, more colors, right? More TVs, more holidays, more cars, more friends, more whatever, right? More Instagram followers. And by the time you're 40, 45, your canvas is full. So you add more things and it doesn't add anything to your life. And I said, whereas you look at it from an Eastern philosophy's perspective, you're trying to remove everything that's superfluous. And the more you remove, the more you're left with the real essence of life is what's important.
Oof.
And I think that's absolutely beautiful. And I'm trying to think about the same way when it comes to architecture sometimes.
Soon you'll hear Magnus describe a home he designed in Barcelona. Reduced to its purest form, a floor plane, a roof plane, and just one column holding it all up. Nothing extra, nothing wasted. That kind of restraint doesn't come from guesswork, it's engineered, and more importantly, it's built by people who know how to make it real. We've worked with Henry Rotberg Steel on some of our most demanding residential projects. 500 pieces of steel, pages upon pages, hundreds of pages of structural drawings, where structural expression isn't just hidden behind drywall, but part of the design. They understand what it takes to deliver clean steel solutions that hold bold architectural moves with precision, strength, and trust. Whether it's a single moment of support or a full structural package, their team works closely with architects, builders, and fabricators to deliver steel that's both expressive and exact. So if you want to learn more about them, reach out to me and I'm happy to make an introduction to Brett and his team. email me. It's Jonathan, JONATHAN @waldenhomes.ca, and I'm happy to connect you with Rotberg's deal. For now, back to Magnus.
So if you look at our house in Barcelona, for example, that sits and looks out of the Mediterranean Sea, we were going through a process of editing, iteration after iteration, to just remove anything that was superfluous and wasn't needed. So what you end up with is a floor plane and a roof plane, and it's one single column holding the whole roof up, and that's it. And all of those tiny, tiny decisions you do to what material something is, how it's supported, or what you removed. It's like you, as an architect, you make 1,000 decisions every day. And individually, you're trying to make the best decision in each case. Oh, how big should that be? How big should that shadow gap be? What's the material? How does that touch? What does it feel like? But when they all come together, they create something that's so much more and bigger than the sum of all the individual units together. Mm-hmm. I call it the je ne sais quoi of building. Right? When you go into a building, you can feel it. If you walk into a house and go, right, wow, you feel that your blood pressure drops, your pulse drops. You just feel it. Mm-hmm. And you can't explain what it is. And that's the key to what good architecture is for me. I can't tell you what it is. I can't tell you how to do it, but I can tell you what it feels like. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the really important thing.
Yeah.
And I think, a few years ago, I took the whole office to Barcelona for an annual trip. And everyone was like in a minibus joking and laughing up to the house. And then we got up to the house and everyone walks in the house and everyone just went silent. For 10 minutes, everyone was dead quiet for just 10 minutes walking around because they were just taking it in.
Yeah.
And that's surely what it is about. So, and that's the thing about life, we're here for a certain time. So let's, do what matters. And, and that's why we're trying to do the best we can by our kids or partners or relationships or whatever it is, right?
I mean, the quote that you referenced just now is making me look around my entire space here and saying, I think I should do a massive purge.
Yeah, we all do it sometimes, purge. That's what, when people move, every time we do a new house with people, when they move, they do a massive purge.
Yeah.
And you realize what you need and what you don't need.
Magnus, thank you.
Thank you.
Even these last few minutes were actually, to me, were some of the best. So I appreciate it. A great way for me to be able to go into the weekend. You shared a lot, and I've learned a lot. And actually, I'll say this to you so you can know it.
Yeah.
A lot of the way that you operate is very similar to the way in which Bruce, who is one of the co-owners of Walden, in the way he operates in driving and pushing and all the rest of it. So there were a lot of similarities that I can appreciate from what you've described and the way we work. So thank you very much. I again very, very much appreciate your time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure always good to chat, right?
Yeah. Take care.
Hope to stay in touch.
Yes.